Welcome to Smart Franchising with FranSmart. I'm Dan Rowe, and I've masterminded the ascent of local favorites to global dominators. This isn't your usual get-to-know-you chat. We're diving deep. We're revealing the raw truths about franchise wealth building. With over 30 years in the trenches, I'm spilling it all. If you have an appetite for unfiltered tales and the hidden blueprints of franchise prosperity, buckle up. We're diving in. All right, welcome back to Smart Franchising with FranSmart, and today we're talking with a super mumbo, multi-unit, multi-brand franchisee, and have Navin and Al with CMG with us today. Mumbo's the new acronym for what almost everyone who gets into franchise really wants to become. Mumbo means multi-unit, multi-brand, but it's basically big, and it's less about the brand and more about building a successful company with franchising and leveraging resources and building restaurants to the point where they self-fund themselves and then layering in new brands and leveraging your team and all that other good stuff. So CMG has over 600 locations across 10 brands. And the most interesting thing to me is that they're owned by 8 partners. So it'd be interesting to see how that functions. But you guys are a top 15 franchisee, and I think a top 5 that are private, or private or independent. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at sort of, it's a little bit nebulous, right? Because all of the franchisees in the country are mostly private. I'd say 98% of them are. So there's different ways to measure them, right? You can look at number of employees, you can look at revenue, you can look at EBITDA, you can look at obviously number of locations and brands, but based on sort of different metrics, if we sort of just our own mumbo jumbo, if we kind of threw everything on the table and we said, where do we rank up against everyone else? We're certainly in the, top 100 multi-unit franchisees, and I'd say even top 20. And then a lot of the larger franchisees and folks that we respect tremendously, they've grown through sort of other people's money, whether that's, debt or equity. And some of the largest franchisees today have institutional investors or family offices. We're fortunate and lucky in that we've grown and we've scaled, and we've been able to sort of recapitalize our business through just various successful, growth, acquisition, strategic initiatives, where today we own 100% of the equity, the 8 partners. That is correct. And I would say that we're probably in the top 5. Yes.
Nice. So CMG, so you guys are in KFC, Taco Bell, Sonic, Little Caesars, Rent-A-Center, Tide Cleaners, which I think is a great idea, and I wish I thought of that, and a bunch of others. So I want to get into that. But thank you guys for joining us. I really appreciate it. So do me a favor, introduce yourself, a little bit about your story, what you guys did even before and leading up to the journey today.
Yeah. Al, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Yeah. So Al Bhakta, I'm one of the founding partners, sort of the original framework of CMG. CMG, it's really an acronym for the word Chalak, Mitra, and Group. The word Chalak means sort of smart and wise, and the word Mitra means friend. So it's just a group of wise, smart friends that got together about 25 years ago. So we started in the restaurant space as a 1-unit franchisee of a concept. We got introduced to in 1999 while we were in college. The brand called Genghis Grill, when it was really a 2-unit concept. We originally became one of its first franchisees and opened up our first store in 2002. And so that's sort of how we got started. And we always sort of tell everybody that our first day we opened for dinner, from 4 o'clock to 10 o'clock, not a single customer walked in the door. And so we had SBA loans, and we had personal guarantees on the leases. We had, we basically borrowed money from friends and family to sort of make that first restaurant a go. And no customers walked in the door that first day. So that first, at least for dinner anyways. And that's how we got started in the franchising restaurant world. But we can sort of to fast forward that journey where we're at today. But that original journey and those partners we're all still together. We got Nick, who's not on the call here, but Nick and Ron were some of the original partners. And then Manish and Pushbrook were some of the original investors with us that, have sort of been along the journey. And I'll let Navin introduce himself and how we got associated and partnered together.
Yeah. So just rewinding the tape, going back, 15 plus years, I have somewhat of an institutional background. I worked for a little bit. I was a junior economist at the Federal Reserve Bank, and then I was a strategic consultant. And then I really built my career at a company called Hilco, where I led our restaurant group. And, I met these guys many, many years ago when they were just sort of in the first or second innings of their sort of journey. And I was immediately attracted to the sort of the values and the energy and sort of, quite candidly, the cojones these guys had to just sort of bet on themselves and, try to do whatever they could to be entrepreneurs. And, there was something exciting about what they were doing, even though they were, relatively small in terms of scale at the time. They just had Genghis. And, it really started with a friendship. Al mentioned the original founding partners. There was a gentleman, Sanjay Patel, who was a physician. And, at the time, he was really the sort of Wall Street capital markets guy. The Indian community is very close. And, when the initial group started, they were really raising friends and family money. And, this physician really was the gentleman who vouched for them. He's still a partner in the business. He's a dear friend of all of ours. His daughter's actually getting married next month, and we're all going there as families. But, it really was just a small entrepreneurial organization that had massive ambitions. And, I saw something in them. And, because I worked on a lot of, related mergers, acquisitions, distress deals, and these guys were always looking for deals, we sort of built a friendship. We never really transacted much when I was at Hilco, but, there was a set of common values. And then, when I had an opportunity to exit Hilco several years ago, it really was just sort of coming back to the tribe. And, I was fortunate that it built a lot of rapport and goodwill. And, they sort of let me into the tent and made me an equal partner. But, I've seen sort of you get to see the best and worst in people when you're either making a lot of money or losing a lot of money. So I've seen all sides of it. And, today we're fortunate that we have enough scale where, I think we have a voice in the marketplace, but, we're still very much hands-on and, involved in the business day to day. So that those same set of values that I saw back then still exist today. And, I would say just as a business, we're getting started, we're still excited about where we're going.
600 units and you're just getting started. I love it.
Yeah.
So, but you got to think about how special that is and like what a gift it is not only to be as successful as you are, but to do it with friends, right? To actually do it in friends. And you said you guys are all going to your partner's daughter's wedding. It's like, that's like a really cool thing. I mean, money does weird things to people. And the fact that you guys are doing it this way, I mean, that's kind of how it's supposed to work. It just doesn't always go that way, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a challenge and a unique business model. If you think about as an analog, the other very large, multi-unit franchisees, the mumbo jumbos of the world, a lot of them, it's singular where there's, one gentleman, or perhaps maybe even one lady, but, from our perspective, there's one person that's really controlling the show. There's nothing wrong, about that. But, I would say that the analogy we use is we're a basketball team, right? Where each one of us has our own unique strengths and, that helps offset some of the blind spots and ego. And, there are some disadvantages in that, we do invest in sort of a quorum and, kind of Knights of the Round Table. And so if someone is, over indexed on an idea and too excited and no one else is, there's a little bit of a Congress or, a little bit of a democracy there. But for the most part, our model works in that we're able to check each other and, through the balance of being able to leverage each other's strengths, we get to actually sort of benefit from that. And it sort of worked over the years where I would say that the rhythm that we have today is really good. Al, I don't know if you got anything to that.
Well, no, I think that's right. I mean, we've gotten to know each other's strengths, as you mentioned, and also weaknesses. And sometimes, you get to sort of only find those out as you're going through this journey, and, understanding everybody over 25 years has been a great ride. It's just been a humbling experience. And I think all of us are getting better at those skill sets and understanding where we sort of play, where we play best in that team that Navin talks about, and where we probably shouldn't be playing and sort of, sit on the bench. And so I think that's been an awesome sort of way to sort of learn. But, we've had a lot of tough times. We've gone through, it sounds great to say we have, hundreds and hundreds of stores and multiple brands, but we've gone through ups and downs. We bought some brands we bought brands in the past where we become franchisors, and we've done a lot of things and made a lot of mistakes where Navin mentioned over-indexing on an idea where, somebody might be able to convince the rest of the group to say, let's go do this. And we probably shouldn't have done it. There was probably red flags and signals that we should have listened to. And I think we're getting, as Navin said, we're just getting started. It's a 25-year startup journey that I think we're just starting to get better at that, and really calling each other out very cleanly, openly, and just open dialogue about what's the best thing for the company and our people at the end of the day. And it's been fun. It's been a great ride.
Yeah, and Dave, one thing I would say that's kind of interesting, I'd love to get your kind of comments on is sometimes when you see a large franchisee, whether they're in one unit or several units, they get very large and then they start to sort of think about trophy assets in the sense that they want to buy a brand. Not that there's anything wrong with that. We've come to the conclusion that our highest and best use and where we have the most fun and where we can add the most value is just being a large top 5 franchisee within systems that we absolutely love, and so we curate and we spend a lot of time diligencing what brands we want to be in. And then we just say, okay, how can we be super relevant to those brands and, become something sizable and, sort of have a legacy. We don't have outside investors, so we don't have to look at exiting in, 5 years or whatever. But you've seen through just being in the same arena with us, large multi-unit franchisees or large franchisees get into the ownership of brands. What do you think about that? We rather just fly the plane versus fix and fly the plane, but some people have had and found success doing that.
Yeah, I've been at this business 35 years, and the industry's littered with people that became successful as franchisees and then sabotage themselves by bad decisions, right? And so in a number of ways, like you could wind up investing heavily in a brand that doesn't work. There's a lot of people that got wiped out, taken their franchise profits, rolled it into real estate at the wrong time, right? Got into trouble. The appeal of being part of a franchisor is the idea that, that it's better to get a royalty than to pay a royalty, right? And when you guys sell your business, any one of your franchises is worth 5, 6, 7, 8, 9x multiple, whatever, depending on the brand. When a franchisor sells, that number could be 4 times that number. So there's attraction to that. Not every franchisee should be a franchisor. Not every franchisor should be a franchisor, right? But I get the appeal. The appeal is, hey, look, we're really good. We're really successful operators. I don't want to name names, but there was another franchise and his premise was to go start buying brands, like a number of franchisees bound together in different parts of the country. And they were going to buy brands and then be the original franchisees of those brands and participate on both ends. And, it's a longer conversation about why then that didn't work out. But what you guys are doing is just simply wise. It's just wise. It's sage. Like if you were giving somebody advice, you'd tell them to do exactly what you're doing, which is you guys are operators. You buy franchise territories, you operate the hell out of them, and you just keep expanding, and compounding your returns and whatever. So it's like, it's so many times it's hard to do what you're doing because you guys, and this is why there's probably, the good news having 80 of you guys is you keep each other from from getting too distracted, and keep reminding yourselves, like, this is what we do. We're at 600 now. We want to be at 2,600. And then let's go talk about doing dumb things.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. Yeah.
You gotta find out how to make me the ninth partner. I don't know if I bring anything to the table, but I want a spot.
But careful, Darren. We have the urge to do dumb things all the time. So
I would be a dumb thing. Yeah. So, hey, so the good news though, and this is helpful for people to know, like 600 unit company started with you guys as a franchisee of a 2-unit concept, right? And it's funny because the dichotomy between, when you got into Genghis, when you did, I mean, that's really early and really raw. Like they don't have anything figured out at that point. And then now you're attracted to so many brands that are enormous, right? That are bigger. So, but like let's go back to the beginning when you guys first got into Genghis. Like what made you choose that brand? How'd that go?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly wasn't, an MBA business school plan at all. It was, we were sitting in 1999, we were sitting at that second store here in a suburb of Dallas called Addison. And we were at the bar while we were in college. And Nick, one of the partners, wrote a comment card and said, hey, if you guys ever franchise, give us a call. While we were in college, we had a couple of businesses. We had a small game room. We had a pool hall. So we had some things that, fairly humble, smaller operations. We were sort of running while we were in college and putting ourselves through school. But so we thought we knew a little bit about business, but, at the end of the day, he wrote that and they called us, right? I mean, that was the biggest thing, is that we liked the concept as a consumer. And, and then they called us when they started, their franchising program a little bit later. And that was sort of how it began. And so, we actually, in between there is one story I'll share, is we tried to buy a 2-unit Schlotzsky's franchisee here in Dallas. She was selling her 2 stores for $40,000. We had sort of pull the money together to pay cash for this operation. It was underperforming, sort of almost break even-ish, but we felt like it could use a lot of work, and we think we could have put the effort and work in it. We went to go to Austin at the time where Schlotzsky's was headquartered, and it was an all-cash deal. We had to present to Schlotzsky's corporate folks, and at that time, they declined us to actually buy the 2 units existing operations. So back to your sage advice standpoint, I would still tell people, stick with an existing, established brand and buy existing first before you start building. And we completely did the opposite of that and built a Genghis Grill, when the brand wasn't proven yet. So
I like both of this. I like Schlotzsky's way back in the day. I lived in Texas in the early 90s. Like, I like Schlotzsky's and I like Genghis. The first time I saw Genghis, I'm like, that's a really cool concept. It's great food. So, I mean, I could see the attraction, but you actually said you put your finger on it when you said it started at the bar, right? The bar is the
sometimes bad ideas start at the bar, right?
Bad ideas start at the bar. But then, so what happened after that? Like, give me maybe just kind of a quick run and like how you went from that to
sure, yeah. So that first store, it took a little bit to start getting. We got it to break even. About 18 months later, we were doing all sorts of things ourselves. We were figuring out marketing plans. We were trying to, the franchisor at the time was small, and they were trying to sell franchise locations. And so they had some early success on selling franchise stores, but then a lot of franchisees were opening up and shutting down, and so as the brand was sort of struggling in the beginning, we were sort of just fending for ourselves, trying to make sure we made payroll. And so, but yeah, we got it to break even after about 18 months, and then, started making a little bit of money. And, while the other franchisees started calling us saying, hey, I heard you guys did a movie theater marketing slide. I heard you guys did a little charity event. I heard you found a cheaper chicken, vendor, et cetera. And so those are things we were sort of naturally doing. And then we ended up buying a corporate store, which was doing sort of double the volume that we were doing. And, but we were making a little bit of money. They were losing about $100,000 a year on double.
Which brand was that?
In Genghis, yeah. So the second store in Genghis, basically, where we basically said, hey, that store's doing double the volume we are, and it's losing money. We're doing half the volume and we're making a little bit of money. Ding, ding.
Bingo.
Let's see if we can buy this from corporate. And so we bought that store, raised some more friends and family, because we sort of our numbers and said, look what we're doing. Believe in us. We can go run this. And that store we made it profitable in first quarter. It was losing about $100,000 a year the year before we bought it. And we made about $65,000 in Q1. You know,
what are 2 or 3 things that you did different than corporate? I feel like I know the answer, but I want to hear you say.
I mean, everything. I mean, we basically worked every shift, got it super involved, and improved the staff, the service. We really follow the playbook and the spec of what they wanted to run them as, and just really servicing the consumer, speed. Got the food costs back in line, got just everything that we were doing at the other store. We implemented that. And so it was just, it's nothing, it's blocking and tackling, it's operations at the end of the day, and being involved and taking care of the customers, taking care of your team. So that's really what drove it. But anyway, so that store was successful for us. And then we ended up buying another franchisee store out, and then 2004 ended up buying the brand when it had about 6 stores left, 3 of which we owned. And again, not by strategy. It was really based on, hey, we're the largest franchisee in a system of 6. We need to actually sort of salvage this, see if we can open stores without royalties. And that was the idea of actually buying the brand in 2004. So, that sort of got us there. And then we obviously, store number 7, we opened ourselves and redid the model. We sort of reduced the development costs, increased the value proposition. And that store number 7 was hugely successful. And then that sort of launched the brand and the success we had. We got it to, in its heyday, got it to over 100 stores, about half we owned and half franchise. But while we were growing that, we started diversifying. So 2 of the partners got into KFC and Taco Bell. We got approved in 2008 in that system, and opened up our first store in 2009. And great time to open up a restaurant, which was the 2009
crash.
but luckily that first KFC Taco Bell store we opened in a suburb of Dallas was successful. And then we ended up buying some distressed stores in 2010 that were about to go dark. In the Midwest, about 20 stores that we bought and turned around in KFC. And that's how we got on the map with Yum. And then we ended up buying some corporate stores from them in 2012. So, I mean, that's the trajectory of the growth of how we sort of went from.
But this is something that you could teach someone, because usually struggling stores, you could have them for a song, right? And so just to go back to the theme of how you guys turned around struggling stores, what are 2 or 3 things that you guys did to make struggling stores good stores?
Yeah, I mean, from the KFC standpoint, we put in a point of sale system and actually plugged it in, and sales started ringing. Right,
man,
royalties started going to corporate. I think they were very happy about that. That was one of the many things, but that was one of the fundamental things. And the second thing Bushbuck will always say is have chicken in KFC. Like, the biggest problem with KFC operations is that they're always out of chicken, and so we ensured that we followed the playbook of actually the playbook that KFC had written for us, and just follow it to a T and have chicken. That tends to lead to sales. And then just accountability and bonus programs for our team, and incentivizing the right behaviors, right? And then holding people accountable, right? I mean, that's generally the playbook of how we've been able to do what we've done. But yeah, historically been able to turn around a lot of underperforming markets over the years in multiple brands. And that's sort of our MO. Navin always says we're a little bit scratch and dent, scrappy. And we do sort of pride ourselves on that mindset that we started with.
I mean, there's a lot of people that make a lot of money, like generational wealth amounts of money, taking and flipping struggling stores. And almost to everyone, you're like, well, what do you do different? He goes, I just followed the system. I just executed. I just operated.
Yeah, Dan, if you think about it just from a learning perspective, there's two types of capital, right? You've got human capital and financial capital. Historically, when we've bought stuff, we haven't had a lot of financial capital. We're not like, KKR or Apollo doing leverage buyouts. I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit, but like our Sonic business, which we're the fourth largest franchisee, we have 191 units and growing. We've literally started with a 4-unit acquisition, and we've done about 30 separate M&A transactions, buying underperforming franchisees or buying corporate stores. We've built several, but, it's really about just having the right human capital. And, as Al mentioned, getting the right people on the bus, aligning incentives. But, if you bring in the right people, that sets the culture. And, if you allow people to be successful and you give people a chance, there's so much human capital in the franchisee world. A lot of these people grew up in the system. They're not highly educated, but they're artisanal in the sense that they know what they're doing. But a lot of them are sort of stuck in this environment where they're getting a salary, they're getting sort of the opportunity to take care of their family. But a lot of these people have these amazing artisanal skills and human capital, but they haven't been uncorked, meaning they haven't been given the opportunity to create wealth for themselves and their family. And so if you find the right person or the right people and you give them an opportunity to do what they know, what they love, because they're obviously, been doing it for a while, they're passionate about it, and that's how they got to be a point of success. And you give them a chance to just say, hey, here's a chance where you can actually be a partner in the business and you can actually do what you love, but, just have an opportunity where you can build that sort of wealth and have that opportunity. That is very meaningful for them. It's very meaningful for us. And so a lot of our success, while we talk about just brute force and doing all these things, those are all true, but it's also just being able to curate the right human capital and try to find the people that have values that align with us. And then quite candidly, doing something that a lot of people don't do is just give them an opportunity to make money and, kind of ride the bus with us.
Well, you're changing their life, right? You're giving them an opportunity to have a different life, which also affects their generations, right? Their trajectory is going to be different. Their family, their sort of kids see, okay, there's a different possibility here. It's a really big thing, but stay on that for a second. It's like, and I'm not trying to get you to name names, but like you take over a batch of struggling stores, those stores struggling, usually what happens is that then they start cutting. Whoever owned them before cuts. All the good people leave. They've marginalized the people that are still there. How do you take that and how do you shift the mindset of saying, no, I need good people in here that can actually turn this thing around and then grow it to a whole nother level? So how does that work from your end? However you want to talk about it, from how you find the people, how you incentivize the people, give them a path for even more prosperity down the road, going from unit level to multi-unit, or however, how does it work? Give someone some advice.
Yeah, I'll start, and then Al's been sort of in this movie longer than me, so he can certainly add his salt and pepper. But I would say, is a sort of contrary to your point about all the good people leaving. Sometimes in an organization, they're sort of like the last of the Mohicans, where people are so loyal to the brand, and they feel like it's more than just the job, and because they're so involved in the business. We found that there's always good people in an organization. Maybe they were mistreated, or maybe the ownership, changed. Maybe it was short-minded in nature, where they were more financially driven versus sort of looking at the long arc of a business. But, there's always good people in an organization if you can find them. But, we're sort of in a advantageous position because we have 600 units. We have a large surface area of people that work within our systems. We have sort of a Rolodex of people that we've worked with in the past. And for us, it's a little bit like a money mall exercise. Like if, we're buying a brand and we want to sort of bring in sort of the right people, if we're developing units and we're buying land and building units, that's a different type of, person that you'd want to bring in, someone who understands, construction or the energy that's needed when you're opening up a new store, and creating that, bringing people in, hiring them. Then there's also just sort of the aspect of a turnaround. If you're buying, let's say 100, corporate units from a brand, you want to figure out what it is that you need to do to kind of make the business more efficient, instill the right culture, instill the right incentives. And so we have the benefit of being able to leverage our existing bullpen. And then we also have a network out there in the marketplace. And so we really take a Moneyball type exercise where, we don't try to find the Ivy League, PE, wants $1 million and sit in the ivory tower. No one bleeds for the prince in the watchtower, but, the person that's done turnarounds, we know what questions to ask. We can tell whether or not they're being real or if, they're just giving us sort of, the opposite of what you call mumbo jumbo, just giving us, mumbo jumbo bullshit. And so, we're really good at sort of curating talent and then giving them the right incentives. Al, I don't know if you'd add to that.
Well, no, and I think a lot of the acquisitions we've done, whether that be from franchisees or corporate acquisitions, there's actually a lot of talent there, so there's just not been nurtured properly. They've been ignored. Like Navin said earlier, they've been marginalized. At the end of the day, we love keeping the existing team in place and really just rewiring their whole mindset and changing that culture. And when it works, it works. And it's very magical when you can actually keep the existing folks that are there and say, listen, try it this way. I assure you it should work. And if it doesn't work, this is how we're going to help you to make sure it works. And it's just that level of support that you provide them and just honestly giving a shit. A lot of times the previous ownership and that they've realized that nobody cares. And once they're disenchanted at that point, it's just sort of game over. Right. And so we've just seen that if you actually care and you help them solve their problems, they tend to actually thrive. And the existing talent a lot of times is and I would say 80% of the time we've had success with just the existing people that are there.
Wow. Just motivating existing people. Wow.
Yep. Because it just, they just weren't paid attention to. There wasn't a program in place for growth. And a lot of times it's tools, you back to the turnaround is like, well, the fryer doesn't work. Or, we've asked about fixing the air conditioning here in the middle of Texas summer from, and it's been like this for 5 years where they're just duct taping it. And well, you know what we do? We go ahead and fix that AC or replace it. Ding, ding. And, just you listen to them. You actually give them the tools that they actually need to do their jobs. And then it just starts snowballing in the right way where it starts, they start saying, wow, my voice matters. They're listening. Oh, I'm making more money. Oh, my benefits are better. Oh, the store's doing better. Oh, wow, we're going to get a remodel because our store's doing so well. And so all of that is sort of rewiring. It doesn't work perfectly all the time everywhere, but I would say 80% of the time, it's really the team that's there. We get the best talent. I mean, we bought stores from family members that didn't talk to each other, and now both family members work, for us. Or we've bought stores from people that their kids are now working for us and are multi-level managers or regional managers. I mean, we've got examples of that. It's just been some great stories that we have over the years. I mean, we've got folks that started in operations from the early days, 23, 24 years ago. And, he's in FP&A, doing M&A work. Like there's lots of other growth stories we've been able to tell over the years as well, which is sort of, that's just fun stuff.
Yeah. Like a couple of kind of tidbits there. Like our first Sonic acquisition was, as I mentioned, was a 4-unit acquisition. And the gentleman that we bought it from, it was a family, his 2 sons were heavily involved in the business. And when we bought the business, we agreed to lease the properties. He kept the real estate, and both his sons still work in our business. One's heavily involved as a leader in our Little Caesars business, and one's heavily involved in our Sonic business. And he wanted them to be able to continue their journey and be entrepreneurs, but he wanted them to have a little bit of a foundation. And so from that perspective, it's kind of interesting when you talk about people whose whole lives were sort of baked into a business and then it's more than just a financial event for them. They want to make sure that the business and its people that they hired and groomed, have sort of a future. I mean, we've talked a lot about the restaurant business, but a good percentage of the brands we operate are outside of the restaurant world. So, we own about 40 something Ace Hardware stores, which is more of a license model than a pure play franchise, but it works very similar. And if you think about buying an Ace Hardware store in a small town, the people that have worked in those stores, the amount of knowledge that they have in terms of, being able to go into a store and asking, one of these, associates of ours, hey, how do I fix this, this issue, or I need this done. What's the right, tool, or, come in with some broken widget, what do I do here? I mean, there's no way in hell that we could replace that human capital. And those people have so much knowledge that have been able to sustain a business. And quite often we just come in and, give them what they need to be successful. We take off a lot of the administrative work, think about all the stuff that happens behind the four walls of a restaurant, like the payroll, the accounting, the legal, the HR, the IT, the capital markets, the benefits, and then just let them focus on what they do. And then sometimes it's just a matter of thinking outside the box. So like, as an example of the Ace Hardware stores, if you think about that business, it's heavily driven by consumers. People go in there, a good percentage of the stores that we had acquired weren't open on Sundays, for whatever reason. That's the business. That's what they've done.
That's DIY day.
Yeah, exactly. And so just something as simple as saying, hey, if we opened on Sundays, we could probably over-index on sales, and it could be an opportunity where the business can make money and you as an individual can make more money because you're creating more value for your store. And, obviously there's the sort of the collegial friction of, well, we've never done that, but then we should. But then something like that where you could say, hey, here's an opportunity, and, who would like to do this? Maybe, you incent them, that creates a dramatic impact on the business for, like you said, like a DIY sign day. So it's 1,000 things like that you can do that potentially change the outcome of a business and sort of create that positive flywheel.
I was going to ask you, so anything interesting about the way that you guys incentivize or compensate your people? You use the term Moneyball. I love the movie, and my mind went to exactly what I think you mean about that in the context of building your team. But maybe just give somebody some insights on, how you get the most out of your people. What's a good, smart incentive program, or how do you align your interests with those guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the main operators, sort of our VP of operations, the COOs of these particular businesses, I mean, they're effectively partners in the business. So even though there's 8 main partners of CMG at the portfolio level, the executive level folks have equity in the business. It's primarily sweat equity. They have to sort of be with us for a period of time. And so there's, cliff vesting that's involved, but like they get to sort of work their way into an equity position. That's the sort of we're going to, we have a saying called fill the boat, and, we sort of stand by that. It's a big piece of the puzzle. So the leadership has equity in the business as long as they stick around with us and they help build the business with us. And that sort of builds loyalty and trust, and they get a decision. Like, we don't just buy more stores or build more stores without them having a say, and they know how it gets capitalized, and we do a refinancing. They know how, what we're paying to the bank. And so they're involved in all of those aspects as a partner would. And in that portfolio, they know that their decisions have an impact one way or another, right? And so that starts there. And then really where it matters on the front line, right, of any of these businesses, whether it's the restaurants or the retail businesses, it's whatever the outcome you're looking for, the KPIs that the outcome of the business. And generally it's sales driven, and then what they can control, right? In a Ace Hardware, they can control shrink and pricing and labor, right? And in restaurants, typically it's food and labor. And so if you just sort of focus bonus plans around that, and then what other behaviors improve the operations, right? Is it OSAT, customer service scores or balanced scorecard or whatever that particular brand and culture is, you incentivize that or bonus that. That's usually how we design bonus programs, right? And they tend to work, and we tweak them. There's obviously tweaks, and we get suggestions from the team, but generally that's what drives sort of behavior, is that they start getting quarterly checks or monthly checks and bonuses. There's a nice momentum swing in the business, and it takes time. And get some early adopters, people that just say, screw it, the old way doesn't work, I'm going to do it. And there's ones that don't want to change. And so, like I said, the 80% of the time we can get existing teams to move and really generate great outcomes. But then there's 20% of the time that doesn't happen. You got to make changes, right? So
yeah, we give carry interest to all of our key people. And even though they get a piece of the action, piece of the profits, I feel like I always still make more, right? The minute that you make them a partner and they get a piece, now they own it. I do far less in these brands than I would, because I've got someone that's got a vested ownership. But I find myself that even though I'm giving them a piece, I'm not actually making any less, right? Like at the end of the day, the dollar amount, I make just as much, and I actually do less. So I like, and what you said is, you're not only compensating them, you're making them feel like a partner, like by giving them input and giving them a decision. And so, it's the way you make them feel, not only money. I think that's important. Hey, you said something about non-food brands. So why don't we get into that? Like, talk about some of your non-food brands. What I'd really love to just spend a few minutes on it. What are the brands? Why do you choose them? What's the appeal of diversifying with non-food? Give me some of that. Like I said, Tide. First time I saw Tide, I'm like, that should have been my idea.
Yeah, I'll start. Maybe Navin can certainly add. He's been a big piece of the puzzle. I would say, I'll rewind a little bit, is in 2014, we sort of sat there and we had our Genghis Grill brand, but then we also had a pretty sizable KFC and a sort of a budding Taco Bell business. And we had some smaller brands that we owned, and we started sort of putting together what our, sort of vision, our mission, and our sort of core values and our dreams is what we call it. And it started like this, and it was a 2-day session where we all really sort of hashed out sort of guardrails and really the playbook of what I would say the next 10 years have been. And we really sold off a lot of our, we sold off all brands generally, including Genghis. Everything's sold. We decided to just go be a franchisee. And then that took a few years to divest, and then we wanted to diversify. And, we realized that, okay, in the food business, you're going to be sort of conflicted. Like, we were in hotels as well. In 2010, we've been franchisees in Hilton, Marriott, and IHG. So we had the restaurant franchise, we had the hotel side. And in hotels, they don't have the non-competes where you can actually be a Marriott and a Hilton franchisee and open one right across the street from each other. In our world, in the restaurant world where we've grown up in, it just can't do it, right? And so if you're in a chicken brand, you're in a Mexican brand with KFC and Taco Bell, you can't do anything else. And then so that left for us, burger, pizza, maybe a sandwich, maybe a breakfast. And so we realized, okay, at some point you're going to get sort of boxed out. And so how do you diversify and keep doing this? And we really felt like there was a lot more opportunity in non-food brands and the ability to sort of scale and consolidate in other franchise systems. And Ace Hardware is a perfect example, right? It's 4,500, 4,700 stores domestically, something like that, 5,500 globally total. And average franchisee owns less than 2 stores, and they've historically they didn't like institutional capital. The word private equity was sort of shunned upon. And for us, we're not private equity, right? We're truly an operator. We're truly, family owned by the 8 partners. And so, it resonated with them. It resonated with us. And, we've been scaling in that brand. And that's been the criteria. We were looking for brands that sort of had very similar characteristics to QSR, where there was consolidation that was available. We didn't want a ton of private equity, honestly, in these businesses to drive up sort of value and multiples. And we wanted to be sort of the ones to consolidate and try to be one of the operators that could sort of, be a brand steward, but also work with the brand hand in hand. And where we've had success in a KFC before or Sonic, we wanted to do the same thing in other brands. So tier one brands that had consolidation opportunities where we can add a ton of value, I think. And obviously the unit economics, right? I mean, the brand's got to be around, and we think there has to be a reason for it to exist, but the unit economics need to make sense. Us coming from sort of a pretty, what I would say, a low margin business, like mostly everything else was pretty impressive. Like you look at Valvoline, they've got 2,000 stores and $2 million AUVs, at 25% sort of EBITDA margins. I mean, that's sort of better than even Taco Bell, right? And so it's like, wow, and so we were like, man, if we had those margins to work with, you imagine what we could do with it. So again, tier one brands, ability to consolidate, ability to add value as an operator. And then could we get to scale, even if we had to start small, could we get to scale to be a larger franchisee in that system where we can sit on the FAC or franchise advisory boards and have some influence and some say in our investment over a course of time, right? Because we've been in KFC and Taco Bell since '08, and we wanted that same trajectory for all the other brands we entered. So the retail brand sort of met a lot of those metrics, and I'll let Navin sort of talk, but Rent-A-Center, Ace Hardware, Valvoline, Tide Laundromat. Tide Laundromat technically doesn't necessarily hit all of those, but it is Procter and Gamble, it is Tide, and it's laundromat business, right? So it wasn't like we're getting into something new. It's an emerging brand maybe, but at the end of the day, it's taking an old model and putting a logo on it, and it's the best logo in laundry. But I'll let Navin sort of speak to it.
Yeah. No, I mean, just to build on what Al said, if you sort of boil down all the stuff that we own today on the franchise or license side, they're all consumer facing businesses. They're all multi-unit. It's a consumer that we understand. And so from our perspective, it allows us to sort of change the diversification, but also stay concentrated in what we know. So because we were heavily focused on just QSR, being able to jump outside of that, our initial sort of foray was we became the largest rent-to-own franchisee with a very large acquisition, a corporate divestiture from Rent-A-Center, where we essentially bought the West Coast or California market with about 100 stores. And that was sort of interesting for us because we had to start to do things that we normally did from a capitalization perspective, looking at sort of asset-based lending versus cash flow lending, looking at receivables and, just understanding the logistics of having to deliver, inventory to someone, that lasted more than 24 hours, right? If you think about like a sofa, versus a chicken sandwich. But over time that led us to saying, okay, almost like if you think about like Warren Buffett, not that we're anything close to, his investment skills, but we admire him greatly. You sort of look for business models that have been around for a long time, that have sort of a moat, and they sort of have the benefit of what you call the Lindy Effect. I don't know if you've ever heard of the term Lindy, but basically it's everlasting, right? Like it's been around for a long time. It's gone through different economic cycles, and the brand has relevance. And so if you think about the brands that we have today, like KFC or Valvoline or Ace or Sonic, or Tide, even though it's a relatively new business model within Procter and Gamble, they've been around for, 100 years. Like Ace just celebrated its 100th year anniversary. And so in a way, it's almost like a video game with a cheat code. We're just benefiting for a brand that's been around for a long time. And we're just, we're not smart like you, Dan, in the sense that we could pick sort of those emerging brands that have, legs and a thesis. We just don't have those skills. So we just sort of, rest on the strength of what's already been around and what's been proven. And we just sort of take that bet, right? The upside might be less, But, we sort of have the ability to ride and compound capital, from a large quantum of capital perspective, so, it's different strokes for different folks. But from that perspective, that's proven to be sort of lucky for us and successful in that sense.
Yeah, downside protection. I mean, for sure, if upside is limited, we certainly feel pretty good about our downside on these scenarios. And it took us some time, like I said, 2004, sort of 2001, 2002 timeframe to 2014 to sort of reset the vision of the company and to be on this trajectory that we've been on now. It took us some time to understand that, right? We were trying to find the emerging brands or the, and reality of it was we realized we're good at running a playbook and find a brand that's been around a long time that has a reason to exist and where we can add value. So
yeah, what's the word? What's the word you use, Navin, that you talked about?
Yeah, it's called the Lindy Effect.
Lindy.
It's Lindy, and I'll tell you sort of what that means. So it actually has, like, if you Google it, there's like a Wikipedia, and there's a whole definition behind it. But the Lindy Effect basically goes back to 40, 50 years ago in New York. And if you think about just the maybe even sooner than that or earlier than that, but there was a comedy club in Manhattan that people would go. So think about like the Jerry Seinfelds or the Eddie Murphys of the world. And this was sort of an emerging comedy club. So people go out, try out their act, and very, very small percentage of those people became successful, ended up, like a Saturday Night Live, but most of them bombed and did succeed. But there was a very interesting phenomenon. There was a cafe across the street from the comedy club called the Lindy Cafe. And these comics would go there after hours, after their sets, and they would, bullshit with each other, and, they would talk. And the Lindy Effect is actually the phenomenon where over time, a lot of these comedians came and left, but the Lindy Cafe actually stayed. And so the Lindy Effect is basically like a lot of people come and go. Sometimes people make it, sometimes they don't. But the Lindy Effect is just the recognition that the cafe that a lot of the people just go to happen to stand there for a long time. And so when we talk about the Lindy Effect, we just mean that something that's been around, maybe behind the scenes without all the noise and all the hoopla. Sometimes you just bet on the thing that's just been there. And that's kind of what we've been benefited from. Funny story talking about New York and Manhattan. I remember many years ago, we went to an auction in New York for a brand, and it lasted till like midnight, maybe even past that. I think it was like till 1:00 in the morning. And then afterwards, we were so disappointed. We're like, all right, let's just go have a good time. And we actually ended up going to Halal Guys, before like going out, and or maybe it was even after we went out, and we were like, this is the most amazing thing, right? Like, there was a line, we had sort of the opportunity to get a big bowl of the shawarma, and you squeeze the tahini sauce and the hot sauce. And we're like, this is the best thing ever. But like, even in our mind, being entrepreneurs, none of us, it was Al, Manish, and myself, none of us were like, hey, we should talk to these guys and figure out how we could potentially franchise this. They've got something special here. So like, going back to what I said earlier, there's a certain amount of DNA that you need to be that chemist to kind of find those people and put things together. We would be the guys that came in when things were boring. Now Halal Guys is an established brand, has, lots of units. We'd be the guys that just came in and said, okay, you guys have figured everything out. You're already on third base. We'll just kind of, play from here. So, but
I'd say you figured it out, because you guys definitely have your own lane that you're doing quite well. And we only talk about the brands of mine that work. We don't talk about the swing and a misses, which there are plenty. Hey, you said something a second ago. This would be really helpful for people to know. I just have a couple more questions. Advice to franchisors about not frustrating their franchisees, or advice to franchisors about getting their franchisees wanting to open up more stores. So you said the FAC, right? The Franchise Council. Franchise councils are formed in large reason because the franchisees feel frustrated and unheard, right? And they want a collective, brain meld, and they want to, basically increase their numbers so that they sound bigger. But it's the whole reason that those things start is because something's not working. But give some advice just from your experience. Like, what are the things franchisors do to frustrate franchisees that are really unnecessary?
I'll take a crack at it. Yeah, I mean, listen, I would say back to the FAC versus sort of the associations. Like the Franchise Advisory Council, regardless sort of how they start, I think they're healthy as long as the franchisor has a seat at the table and it's a franchisor-led meeting. The franchise associations, this could be the part that we may want to go back and edit later, but I'll say it now. Those things probably are not productive, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think the brands appreciate the franchisees sort of having their own meetings and getting in huddles and sort of, call it what it is, effectively becomes a bitch session for the franchisor against the franchisor. I just don't see that those are as productive. Maybe there's historically has been some need for it over the years, for different brands, but we've seen the FACs, the advisory councils, and the committees at each of these brands. We think that's a healthy thing where it's led by the franchisor, right? It's hosted by the franchisor, the franchisors in all the rooms, and it's really them pushing their initiatives or ideas and getting feedback from the franchisees. I think that's healthy, and the representation there of size is also a good thing, right? You just don't want all the large guys on the FACs. You want some smaller operators. You want some regional guys that are in markets that may not be core markets, et cetera. And as long as you have a nice quorum, I think it's pretty healthy. And in terms of just advice, I mean, look, I think unit economics, right? The currency of trade for all franchisors is growth, and you want new development. We will build stores all day long if the ROI is there. You just don't have to even incentivize people to build stores if the unit economics are there. And so everything should be looked upon via that lens. And the moment franchisors have to sort of answer to Wall Street for numbers that they got to put out, to their institutional investors if they're private, that for numbers they have to put out, and the attention goes on new development for the sake of new development, for a return of capital for shareholders on their end, and loses focus on unit economics, it really starts going, the wrong direction. And this is not something new. I'm not spitting out any new facts. This has just historically been the case for all brands, and where brands have struggled, right? And not just brands we're in, but other brands in the industry. So, and it's the same on restaurants versus retail versus automotive, et cetera. If franchisor and franchisees lose sight on unit economics and ROI and sales to investment ratio, and only focus on developing because we're trying to beat the competitor, or it always goes the wrong way until you got to refix the brand again, right? It's tried and true, happens every time. So the advice is just don't lose sight on really what matters, right? And it's the unit economics, because franchisees like us and all good franchisees are going to build stores. At the end of because the returns are there. Capital chases where it's treated the best, right? It's some saying like that, and Navin might know the exact saying, is that capital goes where it's treated the best. Simple as that. So,
yeah, no, and I'd say a couple other things that I think, Dan, you'd find probably interesting and you'd support. One is a lot of emerging brands or existing brands have sort of a philosophy of whether they're going to operate corporate units versus just be a pure play franchisor. I think there's a lot of value in having at least some number of franchised or corporate stores that you run like you would as a franchisee. So just you assume you're, a separate entity, but, you're operating this business. You assume that there's a certain amount of money that's coming, to essentially the house, even though it might be left pocket, right pocket. But when you actually run your own stores, you get to test out things. So if you're trying to do new things like promotion, product, etc., remodels, you get to see what the actual benefit of it is before you try to, scale that out and push that onto other franchisees. I remember, and we're fortunate that, not that we have a perfect hand, but I wouldn't trade our hand in terms of the brands we have against anyone else's. So we love what we own today. But during COVID, there were still brands that, were asking about remodels, and like, it didn't make sense because no one's actually going into stores. So why are you spending dollars remodeling the interior of a restaurant when no one's actually physically going inside the restaurant? It's sort of things like that. So if you sort of have to eat your own dog food, I think that makes a lot of sense. And then what's also interesting is franchisees, both big and small, don't really have a good way of learning from franchisees from an operations perspective. What are they actually doing? And then sharing that with others. I mean, there are committees like, advisory councils and stuff like that. But like, as an example, we run our G&A incredibly well because we've been able to sort of over 25 years compound, whether we're doing it ourselves or we have best in class vendors or whatever sort of concoction we have. Like, we know how to actually manage our businesses from a sort of above the four walls. And that's something that some of the franchise systems would probably be able to benefit from learning and then somehow sharing that with other franchisees. And so there's things like that where when you have a system with a bunch of franchisees, franchisors monitor sort of, what the revenue, unit count, all that stuff, are you paying your royalties? But when you actually look at some of how they make the sausage, how they operate, how they run their businesses, how they hire people, incentivize them and stuff, I don't think a lot of those learnings are shared across the system. And so that's probably an opportunity just as a general franchisor, franchisee comment.
Yeah, I'll say a couple of things. I agree with you about we never, I would stay away from brands that are franchising that don't have company stores because it's not a good use of their money, but they want you to invest in it, right? And I think that you need to have enough operating soul and operating DNA and bench strength. Like, what if you're a lucky franchisor that's opening 2 new restaurants a month? Where are your opening teams coming from? And, those, it's like you got, and also if like you have to your point, a franchisor's got to be going through the same stuff that you're going through in order for you guys to have intelligent conversations about making things better. And so, yeah, I mean, all of our brands are always building merging brands. We always want a growing number of new company stores. And then, I think the idea of sharing information, one thing that we do with our brands, and we'd started at Five Guys, like we would list every single week, everyone's sales, everyone's secret shopper scores. And we would share that with every franchisee. And I mean, this is it's a long time ago, but we would at least send that out and then we would show trailing numbers. And so you could actually look at the model and see how stores sales turn around. It's almost always correlated to the secret shopper scores. But what also happened is then you add a peer group of other franchisees telling their franchisees with low secret shopper scores to get their shit together. And so nowadays with like some of our new brands, we actually take every one of our stores P&Ls and we lay them out side by side and share that with everybody, like all the main KPIs, not the entire P&L, but all the main KPIs. And we do it, one, to show people what the best people are doing, which is very inspirational and motivational. And people, if they're having a hard day, but see 10 other people are killing it in a certain thing and make them feel better. And then the other thing, to your point, is we actually do foster wanting them talking. Like, I want my best franchisees out there helping. So yeah, that's smart. I find most franchisors, at least emerging ones, no, not even emerging ones, even growing ones. There's some big chains that I know about. They spend very little time. They spend a lot of time training their franchisees how to make the burger, how to wash the car. Very little about how do you actually build a franchise company that scales? Like, how do you build a multi-unit thing? And and it's a weird phenomenon because think about it. You guys have 191 Sonic. So it's 191 times the sales times the royalty. That's a huge check, right? And if Sonic was smart, they'd figure out how to get you guys into 591, right? And because it's very little for their revenue from you to go through the roof. It's not a whole lot more work, right? So, and I like Sonic, and you make me want to go to one now. But what anything else?
You should go. Just so you know, the Smash Burger that Sonic just came out with is, I wouldn't call it legendary because it's new, but I put it up against Five Guys. Like your best burger at Five Guys. I think the Smash Burger is legit. I think it's definitely a legend in its making. So if you haven't gone lately, you should go check one out.
What do you think about Five Guys? I met them when they had 4, and now I think they're like 1,800 or something. crazy. And that whole company, like their whole success is around the morels. They're fanatical operators, like fanatical. And all they care about is like, why don't you have chickens? Like, we got to get the burgers right. Why don't you do this? Like, because we're only focused on doing this thing right. It's like, that's a perfect textbook example of if you focus on operations, even through the different economic cycles that we've had, '09, like you're talking about, certainly COVID, and even now, like they're just going gangbusters, and it's all because of operations. And you knock them for high ticket prices or high check average, and it's like their sales. Like I know people, I still see the numbers, like they're ridiculous.
No, yeah, we have a lot of respect for it. I mean, one of our really good industry friends is a large Five Guys franchisee, and we're very not envious. We're just very very proud of what he's been able to achieve with Five Guys. I'd say it's sort of the analog of a Raising Cane's, right? Just focusing on what you know and being really good at it. I would say constructively, maybe the only thing Five Guys might have done wrong is they might have selection of franchisees is important, right? And getting the right people on the bus, opening the right locations. There's always a balance of opening new units and sort of making sure you make each unit sort of, with the right franchisee and operator. But yeah, Five Guys is, it's a great brand. We have a lot of respect for it.
And then here, October of 2025, is there anything about October that makes you guys think that someone couldn't still be successful in this business? Like, go find some underperforming, some things, go focus back on operations. There's something weird about the economy, labor. Is there any reason, like, just be a little bit motivational, I think, and explain to people, like, now's as good a time as any.
Yeah. I mean,
we spoke to, we had the pleasure of speaking with Greg Flynn, earlier this year in Australia. He's a large Yum franchisee as well, and it was a Yum conference in Australia, and anyway, so speaking to him, I mean, he's we asked him a similar question. He's been doing this a little bit longer than us, but not much longer than us. He's obviously a lot larger than us, but like he said, everything he's done and built has been through sort of cash flow and operations, and it is finding the right brand and sort of hitching your wheels or wagon to that brand. I think we're always counter cyclical. I mean, we look at this stuff as like when other people are jumping out, you probably want to look at jumping in. We got into KFC in 08, 09, 10, when everybody was sort of bailing, Sonic sort of pre-Inspire, and it wasn't, pre-pandemic, it wasn't looked upon as truly a national brand. People kept calling it a tier 2 brand. Little Caesars, it's Little Caesars. If you talk about Little Caesars as a pizza brand, it's really not talked about as much as the other 3 large pizza brands are, and because it's family owned and they go after a different consumer, and we like those types of brands. So I would say, I give you sort of that long answer there, is that really we like opportunities where people are looking the other way, right? And so I think if you look at the QSR world right now, there's a lot of opportunities. Obviously, everybody wants to do Taco Bell and Wingstop and Dunkin' and Five Guys, et cetera, but they may not have the opportunities. But maybe some of the legacy brands that are struggling right now, where franchisees are hurting, or they don't have the money to put in the CapEx or their new remodels or a turnaround strategy that the brand's going through. Those are great opportunities, I think, for new entrants to come in and prove themselves and say, hey, I can operate this, I can operate better. So I would look at those types of brands, and there's a lot of them out there right now where the consumer's hurting, and by result, those brands are hurting. I think ultimately, I feel like it's a great time to sort of get in and outside of QSR and sort of that world. I mean, there's lots of opportunities in franchising. I mean, if you look at sort of the home services businesses that are franchised right now, I mean, there's tons of opportunity for consolidation, and there's just a lot of opportunity in automotive. There's a lot of opportunity in other consumer facing service models that are franchised, that there's, that again, the franchise playbook is all it is a playbook. And if you can sort of operate within a playbook, it's certainly a lot of opportunity out there, I still think.
Yeah. And I would just take the other end of the spectrum there. I mean, if you're talking about larger, sort of well-capitalized groups, there's probably an opportunity set that exists. But if you're sort of, scrappy, you're sort of don't have a lot of financial capital, or you're sort of at a point where maybe you're an executive and you're looking to sort of take the leap, it may be difficult to get into a brand like Taco Bell or whatever. I would say maybe just as a plug to you, Dan, I mean, you've been around the block, you've collected your $200, you've sort of gone through a couple of different iterations where you've, gone from the laboratory to the factory, halal guys, Five Guys, that if I was looking at a brand that you were representing, like, I think it was like Brooklyn Dumplings or something, and you've got several others, I would probably weigh in more. I wouldn't say probably, I would weigh in more to something that you were working on, because you're actually putting your own brand and reputation, which is established on something, and you're not necessarily doing it for just financial means. Like, you'll still be able to pay your water bill. You'll still be able to, go golfing or whatever, you like to do. So you're actually at a point where you're, putting a lot of your human capital and what you've compounded over the years onto something. And so even though it might be a nascent brand, I would study it and I would pay attention, because there's a good chance that you know what you're doing. And, it would be a good opportunity, because the opportunity and sort of the market is wide open, right? Like, even today, as, top franchisee, if we wanted to open up more Taco Bells, there's a small part of the country that, that potentially we could, if we're lucky, right? But when you're, working with a new brand that's exciting, there's some energy and there's some massive opportunity there.
The good part about a Taco Bell, I mean, I grew up in Orange County, so that was like my kitchen. I love Taco Bell, but the good part about Taco Bell is it's well known. It's a huge chain, tons of examples of success. The bad part is you're not going to go do a conversion, right? You're not going to convert some other drive-through cheaply to a Taco Bell. It's not going to be inexpensive to build a Taco Bell. If you bought a good one, now turnaround's different, but if you go buy a good Taco Bell out there, the multiples are really high because the lack of risk is priced into that deal.
It's like buying a bond.
Right. And so it takes a lot. I mean, I've heard of 10 multiples, right? 10x multiples. And it's just like, that's a lot. But because you guys have so much access to capital, you can do those if it makes sense. If you're buying some things a little expensive, but you also have other room to grow or whatever, it works in the big scheme of things. For me, for the early stage, the emerging brands, for me to attract a guy that has, 25 guys or whatever, 20 Taco Bells to a new brand, the numbers better be very different, very, very different. Like it has to be worth the risk, or it has to be worth the pain in the ass factor of saying they don't have it figured out. They don't have stores coast to coast, right? So, I mean, the last two food brands that I've added at FranceSmart both had 40%, 35 to 42%, but around 40% corporate four-wall EBITDA. So think about that. Like, when's the last time you heard of a restaurant concept with those numbers? And then some of our non-food, twice as good, right? So it's like some of these ridiculous non-food franchise brands are super.
Thanks for calling us, Dan, by the way. Thanks for calling us on those.
Well, we will. I'll trade you from the 9th seat in your company. Hey, so just as we wrap up, like, what are some of the mistakes? Like, what are some of the things that didn't go well, or some battle scars that you have that you kind of take with you in your decision making for new brands? Did you guys ever chase any shiny objects like ghost kitchens or any of those other funny things?
We did. We got into the frozen yogurt game. We backed a brand here in Dallas called, I'm not even going to bring up names, but yeah, Froyo. We got
the bottling plan.
I mean, like, we've done other franchise or brands that we probably shouldn't have done. So yeah, I think, look, we've made a lot of mistakes. So this is not, I think we wouldn't be where we're at without those mistakes. They're pretty expensive sort of lessons along the way. I think what I would say is use the resources. I think Navin made a great point about, and not that this podcast is about FranSmart or us, but it's like there's people like you vet these brands before you get them. So there's a level of expertise that people should lean on when you get it. My thing about going into sort of tier one brands that are sort of struggling now, and not really that's not the case with Taco Bell or Wingstop, et cetera. Like there's quite a bit of tier one brands that are struggling. At least there is still a large behemoth brand sort of, behind you to back you up when you go into a struggling market to turn stores around. So I've always been, sort of like that. I'm a risk taker for sure. But there's maybe something to fall back on because there is a brand. So, a lot of mistakes we've made, I think was thinking we could do something that someone else couldn't do. In some of those smaller brands and things like that. I think it's very hard, right? But you've seen success stories in the larger brands. And so you're like, you know what, even though this brand is struggling, these 5 operators in this brand are doing well. That you can sort of replicate. But to say, I can buy this brand or I can get into a 2-unit concept and completely do things differently and do it my way, I think that comes with a lot more risk, and I would avoid that. And look, I think acquisitions is a great way to build wealth versus building de novo in the beginning. And it's just what it is. And as a franchisee, I'm sure franchisors don't want to hear that, but like, hey, I need to have some stable amount of cash flow. Then I can take some money and then reinvest that to build new stores. So there is that, as a new franchisee looking at acquisition opportunities, I think is always a safer bet. We've made mistakes by building de novo in emerging brands, and it's a tough proposition. It's like Navin said, we're not very good at finding the next Five Guys or the next Wingstop. I wish we were, but we're just not that good. So.
Yeah. And then, one thing I would say that would be helpful, I think, for the audience, both aspiring franchisees or established ones, there's a certain amount of credibility that you get when you're a larger player. So we can afford to, hire, a more expensive lawyer or whatever. But over time, you really get to know who's good at what they do, whether they work at a small shop or a big shop. And that goes across the spectrum of all the constituents that work on a deal. So the investment bankers, the attorneys, the lenders, the accounting groups. And so if you're looking to get into a system, and let's say you're going to become a franchisee or Five Guys or KFC, and you're making your discovery calls, one of the questions you should ask is like, who do you use for your accounting? Who do you use for your legal? Because that person probably knows what they're doing. They know the business, and like, you don't have to sort of guess on picking someone, maybe your existing family lawyer, business attorney. So there are real rock stars in the business that we are fortunate to be where we are because of them. Some bankers that have bet on us, some attorneys that have been just, unbelievable counsel, some accounting groups, so try to find the people in the industry that, have been there, done that, and know what they're doing. And there's an incredible amount of value that you get just by having the right team in place, not only as partners or as, employees and associates, but also just the people that kind of work on deals with us. That's super important. A lot of people just kind of miss that.
Don't you find it easy? Like if I were buying 10 underperforming KFCs or something like that, I find all the other franchisees super open and super willing to talk to me. I mean, the best source, if I was going to go buy underperforming KFCs or something, I'd go after the best 5 franchisees and say, tell me what to do, tell me how to do it. I've never found those people not willing to share. Yet I know so many franchisees that don't even know their fellow franchisees in the same market.
Yeah, that's 100% true.
Franchisees just by nature they're entrepreneurs. They're very collegial. They're competitive. So they want to know what the best way to do something is, and they think they can do it better, that's a cool part of when you mentioned sort of racking and stacking sales and profitability, or, whatever the metric is. like, we love that stuff as franchisees. And I think the good ones do. They want to be held accountable. They want to be best in class, and they want to help the brand by talking to smaller franchisees or a new entrant franchisee that's looking to get in, because they don't want bad franchisees in the system, number one. Number two, they want to help the ones that want to be helped, because it's just going to help the overall brand. So I think ultimately you're right. I mean, it's a great industry. I mean, we love it. We built a life, around it, and we're fortunate to be able to do it in a great country that allows franchising the way it does, right? So it's a great place to start if you're getting into business for yourself.
Well, you guys have been awesome. So there's a lot to be proud of, like the company you're building and all the people that you're taking along with you, and that you're improving like so many different people's lives. Like, this really is a business you could get wealthy, helping people get wealthy, right? And improving the lives of other people. So you guys are doing great things, and I really appreciate this, and I appreciate you guys sharing your story and some of your advice. So any parting thoughts? How do people find you, by the way? What's your website?
Yeah, it's cmg.team. So that's our website, and we're on LinkedIn. We'll be at the Restaurant Finance and Development Conference next month. But yeah, we're usually accessible. Actually, Al has a soft spot. A lot of the great people that we've met and that we've worked with came from just randomly sniping Al on LinkedIn, not to just sort of making an open target, but he does have a soft spot for entrepreneurs and people that are trying to hustle.
We call it hustle moves.
The hustle moves. Yeah. We on occasion do that ourselves. But we're relatively easy to access.
No AI bots writing.
Yeah, please don't.
LinkedIn auto messages or emails, but actually thoughtfully crafted messaging. Sometimes it's the spot, because you never know who's reading it on the other side.
Well, you guys are awesome. Thank you guys very much. And I will see you guys in Vegas.
Yeah, for sure, Dan. And thanks, man. We've had a lot of admiration and respect for you over the years. We're not sure why you actually reached out to us, but we're grateful
it's
for
obvious.
the chance. Yeah,
it's
man.
Obvious.
But thank you for the chance to speak with you, and appreciate what you're doing for the industry.
Thank you, guys. Take care. See you soon.
Take care.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to Smart Franchising with FranSmart. I'm your host, Dan Rowe. If you enjoyed today's episode, this podcast is only going to get better. Please like, comment, and subscribe to hear more from the most successful franchisors and franchisees, and we'll see you next time.